private parts. It was one of our incredibly boring IUD stories. You know, it looked like Grey's Anatomy. It could not have been more of a snooze, this graphic. I was always, you know, agitating for something a little more, you know, like, can we go spice up these sex ed articles?
But what was wrong with him that he found it disgusting?
Well, you know, one could ask.
You moved from that on to a rather different organization, the International Socialists. And you were purged from this organization, and you don't say why, really. I'm curious. Was it the class nature of the Soviet Union, or is it...
No, you're trivializing.
It was a state capitalist formation.
No, you're trivializing a terrible event. Well, when you have to back up a little bit. You have to imagine all these cute, hot, radical, revolutionary teenagers with no, you know, we didn't believe there was a socialist paradise anywhere. You know, we were like, we had our idea about what we were going to do now and what we could look forward to and a great American revolution. And the older leftist groups, the grown-ups, as I call them repeatedly, and I still think of them to this day as the grown-ups, we would get approached by them. You know, you'd have the Maoists would come and we'd like, ha, 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 laugh at them. And then, you know, like somebody else would come and, oh, they thought we had a bad attitude or we were uppity or snotty or, you know, acting too big for our britches. But there were folks in the International Socialists who, I mean, I cannot help but think that Michael has a different version of this events, but from my point of view, they were appealing because, number one, they didn't have a slavish devotion to Cuba, Russia, China, et cetera, et cetera. They seem to have this very, very practical notion that by being involved in union reform efforts and in labor movements and, you know, tapping into what remained of American class consciousness, maybe we could get something going. And I just, you know.
And they're fucking each other like crazy, too.
Well, but you could have said that.
I didn't expect that out of a sectarian party. I was a little surprised to learn.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't understand. I thought it was pretty sexy time. In any case, I did drop out of high school. School seemed more and more irrelevant. I moved to Detroit, as you read in the book, to be in the center of it all. So did a few of us from California. We continued our high school work, which I thought was a very clever combination of standing outside schools with both our paper, our magnificent ideas, and a lot of marijuana. And it was just a winning combo. And then it was interesting. The IS had quite a bit of success in some relationships. We started a rank and file group in the Teamsters with other Teamsters who were sick to death of the whole Hoffa, you know, gross out, sell out history. It's interesting now because when you think of unions, you're like, they're so militant. My God, you know, they're in the Madison State Capitol and they're outrageous. But when I was involved, it was like total company bed partners. You know, it was like they were both awful, and
there's still a lot of that going around.
There's still a lot of that going around. You know, lots of guys with big cigars. You know, the whole number. So it's interesting when you have a little bit of success and there's something to hang on to. There starts to be these, no, I'm sorry, no, you're not. I'm afraid you're not enough of the perfect working class paradigm that we're after here. Although I think a lot of that was just masking other agendas. But when you say, you know, why was I thrown out? It was because I wanted our organization to embrace people wherever they were, whatever kind of job they had, wherever they happened to be in an industry, or even if they were, you know, frankly unemployed. You know, that they
wanted basic industry, right? Nothing else.
Yeah. Well, again, when you think of some of the people that were pounding this down my throat, had they ever worked in an industry? No. So I'm not, you know, to this day, I'm not sure. There were these...
I was scandalized that they had to use garlic powder, too, rather than real garlic.
No, that was another...
Oh, that was it?
Yeah, I remember feeling like we may have our stupid, trivial, workerist nonsense, but I've heard in that other group, they make people use garlic powder because they say that real workers don't use real garlic. You know, like there was just this fantasia, and when you looked at the bigger picture of what was going on to, you know, in terms of Reaganism and where America was, the idea that we would be fighting over these things and busy ejecting people when, you know, you'd want to have everyone you could on the same page. It was tough. Now I wonder how everybody looks back on some of those issues, you know, and considers, you know, what led to what. In my perspective, if I had written a different kind of book, I would have said everyone on the left was going through this. After Vietnam, there was this massive, like, what now? What's next for us? And the kind of way that you can unify when you think everybody's on the same page against a common enemy. This is often the case, that things fall apart in tragic ways when the common enemy is removed and you're faced with what's left.
Let's move on to talk about sex now.
Okay.
I remember, well, you know, at a tender age, I'd read Kate Millett's Sexual Politics. You know, I was infected with this very anti-pornographic idea of what feminism is all about.
You mean you didn't masturbate?
Well, of course. But, you know, in the privacy of my own bed. But then I remember the first time I saw a copy of On Our Backs. It was in St. Mark's Books.
Oh, really?
And I said, wow, this is great, man. You can be a feminist and still like sex that's not scored to soft violins. But the way you tell the story of the emergence of On Our Backs is just like kind of an accident. A bunch of people got together, talked to each other, and like created this thing. It was not like some kind of more organized, conscious movement, was there? It just sort of emerged from this milieu that you're in?
There were definitely precedents. If you want to walk it backwards a little bit, you have a feminist movement that internally had become very divided about how to critique and address sexism in popular culture. It used to be we would hold up a picture of some woman who was going to get divorced if she didn't make a decent cup of coffee or get the ring around the collar, right? Oh my God, how ghastly. Then there'd be a picture of some, you know, banal porno chick in a bikini going, hi, I'm an idiot, you know, and we'd look at both of them and say, these are both equally bad, and we don't care who has their clothes off and who doesn't, right? Irrelevant to us. We're looking at the chauvinism, at the, you know, the infantilization, the stupidity of this bias. But I remember this critical point. There was a group in Los Angeles who critiqued a billboard that appeared on the Sunset Strip for the Rolling Stones' new album. It said black and blue, and I'm loving it. And there was a critique like, what, she's supposed to be a sexy babe because she's got a big bruise on her face? You know, what kind of a message is that? And that little tiny campaign got unbelievable press coverage. And I think the women who had initiated were quite impressed. You know, when we had criticized all this other non-X-rated, non-R-rated stuff, no one gave a shit. But you attack something that's feminine and sexy, all of a sudden everyone's in a terrible lather. And little incidents like that were happening all over the country, where sexual representation, desire, all of this was being debated. And then you had some people coming forward, particularly in academia at first, who said, hey, you know, this is, it was the same kind of thing that went through in the left, the idea that we're all in this uniform and that we're all the same, and that individuality and artistic expression and a sense of the unconscious and a psychological appreciation for what's going on, that all of that has to be eliminated, and that's not going to fly. It was a tremendous rift. On Our Backs, in terms of its immediate ancestor, was a group called Samoa, which seems so funny to think about that now. It was named after a place, an idea in that novel, The Story of O. But it was something that Gail Rubin and Pat Califia at the time and a few other, Cynthia Slater, a few other women created, that was lesbian feminist sadomasochism, which you can just imagine, you know, even today, that still sounds like, what the fuck? You know, like, you know, people weren't, you know, what are you getting at here? And they did a tiny little book called What Color Is Your Handkerchief? And then another book called Coming to Power that blew people's minds. They both had fiction, nonfiction, like agitprop, as well as eroticism. Do any of you remember these books?
The second one.
Yeah, and I remember reading this piece by Califia and going, oh my God, I'm getting so hot and bothered. And then I read something by Gail, and I was like, my mind is being blown. She's absolutely right. And this kind of reaching back into queer history and saying, you know what, we're not going to turn this into some antiseptic affair just so that people think homosexuality is, acceptable. I loved it. You take that along with a group of women who worked in the sex trade who were coming out as dykes and didn't give a damn who knew about it on the job, and who knew perfectly well they weren't welcome at a NOW meeting, but wanted to do their own thing. So those are a few of the little pieces that came together.
And then you commented it was strange to go from being threatened and beaten by Teamster thugs and the Klan to being denounced by people who you share a good bit of politics with.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it was so, I liked writing that one chapter. I mean, it could have been a book in itself about when I'm in Louisville. I was there during what was called the busing crisis. I mean, what a euphemism that was. It was integrating schools, and there was just this panic. If you were a white person in Louisville who defended integration, you had to be a communist. There was just no other possible, reason for your existence. And I remember I didn't have enough room to include all these things, but I was passing out flyers in front of an auto plant about maternity leave, which seems so wholesome now. Like, why would that be such a big deal? And it had a picture of black and white women, auto workers, together, awesome, fists in the air. Yeah, and a guy pulled up to me in his car with this really big grin, and I was like, hey, someone's going to stop to talk to me instead of just being out here in the cold. And he unrolled his window, and I walked right up, and he pulled out a .357 and just put it right here and said, get your nigger-loving communist cunt off this lot. And I was like, this is the Louisville experience every day. This has been like it's just wearing me down a little bit here. And later, in an incident where I talk about in this book, but others, which I just, like I said, it would just start to sound like I was some kind of death magnet. But when the woman at the University of Minnesota rushes at me with the scissors in the bathroom, this was like Susie Bright, coming to the University of Minnesota, doing a lesbian erotica slideshow, history of lesbian sex and cinema. I'm greeted by protesters with a giant blood banner, where you pretend it's fake blood, and a flyer that said, first, slavery in the Roman Empire, then the Holocaust. And now, Susie Bright comes to the University of Minnesota. Like, wow, I'm important.
You're a big badass.
Yeah, I am so fucking VIP. And I happen to be ridiculously pregnant. I should have never done this when I was pregnant, but on the other hand, being pregnant saved my ass, because after the show, I said to the producer, I don't want to be a sissy, but would you just go to the bathroom with me? And this young woman rushed me, and I just, I would think about her, and then I think about that guy, and the way there's a certain look people have when they want to kill you, where, they swear to God, they see the horns on your head. They know that you are the devil, whatever that means to them. And maybe this is my Catholic thing speaking, but I felt like I was part of, caught in that myth. They are going to strike a blow, and you're the body, you're the corporal,